All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our Round 4 live stream for the Charles Schwab Challenge. Going to get you ready for all of your showdown lineups with a look at the weather report, any of your questions or deep dives that you've got for me in the live chat. We'll go through some strategy, some lineup construction on DraftKings as well. Essentially, all the information that you need before lock to get you ready for your process. So anything that you're curious about, just feel free to go ahead and ask away in the chat. So we got Jake down there, Nick as well. Nick doesn't know how long he's going to be here, but glad to have you in the live chat at any point. That's what really counts. You got Sights down there, Ross as well. And yeah, man, the glasses are on today, so you know shit's getting serious. So let's go ahead and hop on in. So the first thing we're going to look at would be the golf course, which did play a little bit easier in the first half of the day. If you split it by the AM versus the PM wave, which today did have a pretty big split. So it's not like it was threesomes off both tees and it was only like a 2-hour difference. It was about a 0.64 shot difference. So maybe not enough to fully stack. It was pretty similar to what we had in round number 1. And you saw some spike performances from both sides of the draw. So actually, I don't think the waves are going to work for round number 3 quite properly. They had Ben Griffin and Schmidt on opposite sides of the draw. And obviously, they were both in the final group together. But in general, you had some guys going off early that played well. Your McIntyre, Scotty Schefflers of the world, et cetera, et cetera. And then some of your leaders that were your better form players that got the job done as well. And the reason why I'm harping on this so much is the weather for tomorrow looks almost the exact same. The winds are going to be up for pretty much the entire round. And though I do think the winds are going to dry out the golf course as the day goes on, that was still only like a 0.65 shot difference like you had for today. So it is Sunday Showdown, so it's not like any sort of a weather edge we could go all in on anyways, as we're going to have to take some later starters for those placement points. But because it's only going to be about a half a stroke difference, I'd imagine, it wouldn't be an all-in situation anyway. So you're going to need some later guys. You're probably going to want some middle to early tee times as well for differentiation purposes. So really from the lineup construction segment, I wouldn't say that the Sunday Showdown slate is really all that different. And I'm assuming they're going with the same tee time situation. In fact, let's just double check on the PGA Tour site and you can see that they're doing the same exact thing. So because you had the one withdrawal before lock, they're doing threesomes off of hole number 1. And your first tee time is at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Your last tee time is the whole way here at 12:50. So that same kind of spread from the first to the last group. So really nothing changing from round to round. So the next thing I'm going to focus on would be the ownership. And yeah, I've got the glasses on. I'm really on top of my shit today. I've already done all my projections and player poll for today. And yes, that is less than an hour after the round ended. I'm on one today, guys. I've got some more energy than you guys can even imagine. So we're going to talk about some ownership before we go through the player poll stuff. So what we've got on here are my projections for tomorrow. So these won't be exactly where SHIPIT Nation has them. But the purpose of this is to show you where the ownership is coming in, because maybe this is your first time playing a Sunday Showdown slate. You don't really get how the placement points are going to impact the ownership. Well, here it is right here, because outside of a Scotty Scheffler, who's only -7 and is going to be the highest owned player in my projections, it's pretty much the leaderboard after that. You've got your -13s that are over 30% owned, your -8 chasers, even -9s are in that 20 to 25% range. And then the further down the leaderboard you go, so when you start to get to like your -6s, your -5s, you're going to start to see them just below this with the ownership mark. But in general, all the ownership, all the steam for tomorrow is going to be almost directly tied to their leaderboard position. And the projected points do have to be blacked out, as I've got to keep those for my Patreon members. But with the Sunday placement points in play, the reason why these guys are getting all of these, all this steam is because they're projecting so much better than their peers. And so the reason for that, of course, is their starting position. But remember that just because you're starting in the top 5 does not necessarily mean that you're going to finish in the top 5. That's why a lot of these players that are over 20% owned are pretty good fade candidates. And I can tell you that of these top 10 highest owned players, that only 3 of them are making my player pool. So of the other 7, all of those are going to be fades for me, showing that game theory, which is a huge part of our round 2 and 3 process, is still a really big part of what you're doing for Sundays. And that's not to say that you can't play these guys that are towards the top of the ownership. It's that you probably want at most maybe 2 of them together in a lineup, because if you start to play 3, God forbid, 4 of these guys together in the same kind of build, your chances of getting different with your last 2 players are going to be slim to none in some of those large field GPPs. So if you're taking 3 players of chalk towards the top end of this list, that's when you've really got to start to think about leaving salary on the table, or really getting different with your last 3 players and looking for sub 1% ownership on those 3 kind of guys. Because once you start taking over 2 of these guys in a single lineup is where that product ownership starts to become a problem. So just wanted to set the table with the ownership numbers here, give you guys an idea of where the field is playing, so that when we go through these shots gained metrics here together, that we have a reference point from when we're talking about ownership and why maybe I like guys that are a little bit further down the leaderboard as opposed to some of these guys towards the top. So if you have any specific ownership questions, strategy involved when it comes to taking some of these guys, just feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. I also like to point this out because you can see over here exactly why I'm on certain plays. And we're about to talk player pulse. I think it's a good little transition here too. It's the same as rounds 2 and 3. So if you guys remember, it's ball striking, short game regression candidates. We've talked about that at nauseum on the channel, but course history, high upside players also mixed in there. And then the one category that's added on top of it for Sundays is this placement point tag, where I'm still going to be playing some of these guys starting towards the top. It's just that because they're so highly owned, I have a whole entire category for those players, because if you're going to use them, you're going to get leverage to somebody towards the top. You're going to have to play them in like half of your lineups to do so. So you better really believe in those sort of guys. And for me, if I'm going to take a conviction play towards the top, it's because their shots gained metrics over the entire event are extremely favorable. Or maybe they had a really good spike round in round number 3. And that's the case with one of the 3 guys that I'm playing up here towards the top. The other 2 are these placement point guys that I'm mixing in. So always have reasoning for the player pool that you're getting to. And it doesn't have to be the exact same as what I'm doing. This is obviously my process for any given slate. But I showed this to you to give you some perspective into what a pro player is doing. But let's bring up the shots gained metrics. Let's do some deep dives on specific players. Anyone that you want my thoughts on, feel free to go ahead and throw those down into chat. But we're going to start with some shots gained metrics with the ball striking, also some of the short game stuff. And then we'll talk about any of your specific questions afterwards. What's going on, Garth? Glasses Luke is definitely getting real. I got to say, it adds like 10 points to how smart I look. Like if you had like an attribute system, like on a video game, think like Fallout or Skyrim, that kind of thing. It gives me a boost, I guess, when I have these on. He said, thanks for the 4 days of grinding. Of course, man, it's been a long week, but the golf is a good little distraction. Meissner's putting is holding him back 3 days so far. Is his historical putting better than his current showing? That's a great question. So I guess we'll go through some questions now before I go through all these shots gained metrics together. If you look at the entire event, he's lost about 3 strokes putting. Let's see. Has he bled them all 3 days? Yeah, kind of looks like what you said is exactly right there. If we're going to check up on Meissner, let's just look at the last few months for him. So this is on Bet the Number, of course, a site that I'm partnered with personally on my YouTube channel and a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. And of course, my database of choice when it comes to doing this kind of research. But if you take a look at the putting stats, it's kind of hit or miss. The two starts ago at the CJ Cup, he did gain strokes to the field. Valero, he gained about 5.5 strokes. But you see all that dark red there. He also has his weeks where he can't find the broadside of a barn. So I would say that he's a volatile putter, not really one of the guys that you can count on to gain every single round. But should he be better than losing 3.6 strokes over 3 days? Absolutely. I mean, he's due for at least to have closer to a neutral performance, I would say. But he's not like Denny McCarthy losing strokes where it is truly eye-opening. He said, you're watching a little late, but you're here and looking forward to my input. Hey, better to have you late than never, Ed. So welcome on in, man. He said, after watching him murder your plays the last couple of days, you just know that Gerard's going to shoot 66. That is normally how it works, Chris. That's something I've noticed in DFS is when you hop off of guys early, it ends up burning you. And I will say, man, I'm playing them again tomorrow. So I've shared that exposure with you at least for one of the last 2 days. Tomorrow I'm going back to it because everything that's been there the last few days, shots gained, coming around with the putter. Hopefully at some point you can save for round number 4. So yeah, if you were on him, at least throw him into a couple lineups. I would say I wouldn't make him like a core play because of where he stands. I mean, he's at the very bottom end of the leaderboard, but those guys are going to have softer greens than the PM guys. Birdie average might even be like half a birdie higher for some of those earlier starters. So you're going to have those guys in lineups and spots. And I don't know. I'm not saying Gerard's my favorite play. He's not towards the bottom, but he's up there for sure. Can we give my opinion on Ricky Castillo? Absolutely. He said power and Fisk. So, yeah, let's start with my guy, Ricky Castillo, because he's at T18. I hope the ownership doesn't get steamed up. So I'm going to be rather quick with this. His ball striking stats are immaculate this week. He was one of my favorite plays when it came to the modeling. I bet him for a top 20, top 10, you name it. I laddered the guy with a lot of my exposure. Yeah, I love him tomorrow. The only thing I hope with Castillo is that he doesn't get steamed to absolute shit, because at T18, he is going to get ownership. And then he said power and Fisk. So sure, let's look at those two as well. So Seamus Power, if I could spell his name right, it'd make it a little bit easier. He's been all over the place over the first 3 days, but in round 3 in particular, he did gain strokes on approach, which is a positive sign, but the rest of his game was hit or miss as well. So, you know, very similar to the stat profile that we've had for the entire event at this point, but it's like a 5.5, 6 out of 10, because he did gain in the most important category, that being the approach play. And the putter is normally a little bit better for Power. He is an above average putter on the PGA Tour as his career baseline. I've seen worse stat profiles. And then the other one was Fisk, right? Who I'm playing Fisk tomorrow as one of those low-owned early guys that I'm using. It's because of the shots gained putting. He lost over 2 strokes on the greens today, but he gained almost 4 strokes with his iron play. So he's not a sexy play. I mean, he's T51. You've got no chance at placement points. But like I was mentioning with a Gerard, there's a whole bunch of guys going off early that I was considering for my player pool. You're going to have leverage. And I think there's worse players that you could get to than somebody that checks a lot of the shots gained boxes that we're looking for. So you've got my cosign on Fisk, especially because I'm using him. When he cuts his hair, then we can really get to the IQ look. Yeah, man, I actually almost cut my hair today too. I was on one today. Let's put it that way. Can I win without having the winner? You're going to have to rephrase that, man. You said, yeah, you're going to have to rephrase that question, because I have no idea what you're saying. Can you win without a winner in captain mode? Maybe that's what you're saying. I have a feeling that's probably what you're asking, is whether you have to have the winner in captain. I don't play captain mode showdown, so I'm not the best person to ask. It depends on the price of the guy that wins normally, because I'm just kind of using NFL showdown as a little bit of like a 1-to-1 comparison to that. I mean, if the guy that wins Scotty Scheffler, you might not have to have him at the captain spot. But if it's like a 7-8K guy that wins and you're in the large field GPP for captain mode, then you probably do have to have the winner. So I think it kind of depends. And hopefully that was your question. It was like I said, you might want to work on the wording there just a bit, just to make my job a little bit easier. You love Fowler tomorrow. What says you? Ricky, I hope he plays well. I gotta say my heart hopes that he has a good round. He was short game dependent today, though. He lost on approach, gained 2.3 strokes putting. If you take a look at the entire event, it's a little bit better. He is still a little short game dependent, gaining 5 strokes putting, but he is gaining about 3.5 strokes, almost 4 strokes actually, between the ball striking categories. So yeah, Ricky, I'm cautiously optimistic is the way that I would put it, because I don't think it's the best stat profile. He's crumbled on Sundays the last few times we've seen him in this situation. I'm a big Ricky Fowler fan, so I hope that trend ends up getting bucked. But yeah, cautiously optimistic, because if he can gain ball striking tomorrow, short game has been stout this week. I have no worries about that, really. I mean, I'm not assuming he's going to gain 2 strokes putting again. If he's got some nerves to deal with, maybe not going to make as many putts as what you've seen so far this week. But if he gains 1.5, 2 strokes ball striking, then, you know, that's made up for right there. So yeah, cautiously optimistic. 5 out of 10 with the stats, though. It's not a favorable profile, but it's also not the worst one I've ever seen. He said, do I prefer captain play or full 4 round? I play the regular showdown for round 4. So yeah, I don't play much captain mode. And like I said, let's work on the wording a bit. You're tying me up. Hisatuni bounce back. Are people going to get off of him? No, I don't think people are necessarily going to be off of him. So when we were looking at the ownership projections before, I had the top 10 highest owned guys up there. Hisatuni is not like one of like number 12 or 13 or anything like that, but he is in the top 20 highest owned players on the slate. So I wouldn't say that people are like completely jumping ship on Rio, but he's not going to be one of those 15 to 20 percenters. He's going to be a lot closer to, I believe, I actually just double check so I can give you an exact number. I thought it was close to like 12, 13% ownership, but just so that I don't have to guess, I'm just going to double check my spreadsheet. So 1 second, guys, while I bring that up. My guy Rio, who today he hit his irons well, but wasn't putting that well. He's about 12% owned in my GPP projection. So he's not super highly owned, but he is higher owned than a lot of the other guys around him. He said you needed Etch to move up the board. Do his stats indicate a lower round? I'll let you know. Let's take a look. I hope he plays well too. He's just one of my favorite players out here. For the week, he's only gaining with the putter. Oof, that is a big red flag. So unfortunately, doesn't look like it. Today, though, he completely flipped the script. The short game wasn't there, which it was for the first few days, but he gained 2 strokes with his iron play. So could he turn it around? Yes. It looks like he was setting up a lot of birdie looks today, but he wasn't getting that much out of his round. You can see towards the right, he had 3 birdies or better, only 2 bogeys or worse. So a very clean round. I mean, he played boring golf, which a lot of times is good golf. It may not translate to DraftKings fantasy points, but in terms of actual scoring, a lot of players will take boring golf like you had from Nico today, especially when it's tough conditions like we had from round number 3. And at T51, it gets to go off pretty early. So yeah, it's like a 7 out of 10, man. Like I thought it was going to be closer to a 5 or 6, especially after we saw the full event stuff. But the round 3 stuff in particular shows that he's trending in the right direction. Just has to get hot with the putter. And I mean, he's made some eagles this week. He had the really hot start in round number 2, I believe, where he was like -3 through 2 holes. Let's see one of those tomorrow morning. Then you might be able to get him into the optimal. What's going on? C. Floyd, welcome on in. He said, can Matty Schmid continue the ungodly putting? I almost just want to say yes so that we can mush him or something, because he's causing me some issues in my main slate right now. I don't have any Matty Schmid this week. I just did not think he was a very good course fit. I'll stand behind that, by the way. The course fit's not why Matty Schmid is towards the top end of the board. Like my guy Sites was saying, it's because he's gained 10 strokes putting. Like this is just next level stuff. You never see guys gaining over 10 strokes in one category in an event. And this is through 3 rounds. This isn't an entire event where Matty Schmid has gained 10.3 strokes putting. Imagine if he gains like another 3 to 4 tomorrow. So I would say the odds are stacked against him. You even saw him today when he was making some of his putts. He was shaking his head because even he couldn't believe that they were going in. I'm thinking about that bogey putt on 16. I mean, he gave a little wry smile towards his caddy. And that was after making 10-footer after 10-footer pretty much the entire day. And they said the stat on the broadcast. I haven't been able to verify it myself, but if they said it on CBS, I'm going to assume that they're not just making it up and pulling it out of their ass. But they said that he hasn't missed a putt within 10 feet for the entire week. Actually, sorry, they said he missed 1 putt that was within 10 feet for the entire week. That is so unsustainable. I mean, I can't even tell you how unsustainable that is. So when we go through the field here in a second, that's going to be something we point out. All good. You're messing with the auto text. Okay, it makes sense now why I couldn't get you. Dude, that auto text, anytime I try to use it, it screws it up. So I don't even bother with it. And he said, who is the early morning sleeper, and then will wind be a factor? If you want to check the weather stuff, I do touch on that towards the beginning of the live stream. So I'm going to push you back to then. But yeah, it does look a little bit calmer in the morning. Honestly, that's not why I think it's going to play easier, though. It's all about how receptive the greens are going to be in the morning. That's at least what it was for today. And then he said the early morning sleeper. We'll go through the shots gained metrics, and I'll let you pick one. I don't like just picking out one player and throwing them out there because it's just picks and plays aren't the way to learn how to be a better DFS player. The better way to play better DFS is to refine your process. So we'll focus on that because I think it'll be more useful for you. Who do I think is scooping tomorrow? So I guess winning is what that's a euphemism for. Probably Ben Griffin. Usually legit guys win around Colonial. And I hate to be a hater about my guy, Matty Schmid, but 10.4 strokes putting, come on, right? That's not going to happen 4 days in a row. Like I have a really hard time thinking so. Ben Griffin would be my guy. So thanks for the deep dives. Didn't have a chance to watch, and the scorecard doesn't always give the full story. That is 100,000% correct. So, and then can I do the other 67 players? No. You know the answer to that though, man. But yeah, let me know if there's anyone else you're curious about, and I'll go through them, man. He said Scotty shot on 7 was insane. Yeah, that was the one through the trees, right? When he was in the washout to the left. I said that was one of the best shots I've ever seen. I'm not sure if that was hole 7. I'm assuming it was, since that's what we're talking about. Crazy stuff. Schmid's putting, not only is it unreal, but it looks goofy. He's got the Bernhard Longer going, which, hey, Bernhard Longer is one of the best putters of all time, so we can't talk too much crap about that. Let's go through these shots gained metrics rather quickly. So just like rounds 2 and 3, I look for these ball striking guys, and just like I was saying to my guy LSU Nick, Castillo is absolutely piping the ball. So I know he's going to get steamed up. I'm already expecting him to be like 15 to 20% owns, but he gained like 4 strokes approach today, but lost strokes with a putter. That is just like the absolute nutted stat profile. Nick Hardy and Glover were also really good with their ball striking, but they got a little bit luckier with the putting. And what I'll say about a Hardy, a Glover is that neither one is known for being a good putter. So maybe they come back down to earth a little bit. Even a Scotty Scheffler gained a little bit more putting than really what we can expect him to do most rounds on the PGA Tour. The difference is that he's world number 1. He's actually a top 15 putter on the PGA Tour this year, whereas Glover and Nick Hardy are well below average putters on the PGA Tour circuit. So an Aldrich Potgieter also had rather impressive ball striking stats, gained over 3 strokes between the off the tee and approach, but lost over 2 strokes short game. So kind of like Castillo, that's another really good stat profile where he's doing it sustainably with the 2 most important categories, and maybe due to come back down to earth or in a good way. With the short game, a few other profiles that kind of stand out. Hideki Matsuyama has a relatively favorable profile there, gaining just under 3 strokes between the ball striking and about neutral with the 2 short game categories. So, not quite a short game regression candidate, but the ball striking stats are something that could get you onto him. And Akshay Bhatia had a pretty good ball striking day, but about a stroke and a half lost between the short game categories. Just like the last few days, it's not always the gospel. It's not like you're going to use this 100% every single time, but this is a good way to research some of your sleeper plays. And especially when you can find like Michael Kim's at T43, your Meissners at T43 that are going off earlier, then you can try and find some leverage. And I know we mentioned Echevarria, Stephen Fisk as a potential value play. Going a little bit further down this ball striking board is where you start to find those kind of players. And towards the top, it's more so those conviction plays that the shots gained metrics are going to help you with. But just going down to like the 15 to 20 range with the shots gained ball striking is where you can find those leverage plays. And then the other part of this is the short game. So these guys that gained a bunch of strokes on the greens kind of have a very hard time doing that in back-to-back rounds. So we already talked about Schmid, so we're not going to harp on that anymore. But your Robert McIntyres, Malnati's, Grazermans, and Sapins, all players that had really lucky days on the greens. And while maybe one of these guys that gained over 2 strokes, maybe 2 of them goes out there and is gaining over a stroke and a half tomorrow, the vast majority, so 75% of these guys, are probably going to be about a neutral, if not a loser, when it comes to the shots gained putting. So unless they had really good ball striking stats and, it was them gaining across all 4 categories, these are the kind of guys that you're going to see me avoiding for the most part. And it's not just the putting, but also the around the green play. Players that gained a whole bunch of strokes in this category can't really be counted on doing it multiple days in a row. So, for example, your Stevens, Jesper Svensson, even a Ryan Gerard gaining 2.3 strokes around the green is something that's a little bit of a red flag. And it's not to say that you can't play any of these guys. For example, I'm still using Ryan Gerard, hoping that he can be a little bit better when it comes to the shots gained putting. But it is going to be a helpful data point when it comes to building your player pool. And if you take a look at the guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting, it's not like them losing around the green and putting is a good thing. It's that if you can find decent off the tee and approach stats, but really all of their negative was with the 2 short game categories, then maybe you consider them for a bounce back. So just to kind of go through this and show you a few of those players, like Gotterup, he wasn't great today, but he also wasn't horrendous with the ball striking. He lost about like a stroke between those two categories, but he lost almost 4 strokes putting. So like that could be a short game regression candidate. Rico Hoey lost like a stroke ball striking, but lost almost 3 strokes between the short game. Like he could be a regression candidate that you use that's teeing off early. Taylor Moore, I know these are ugly plays. These are like the or he could candidates when it comes to the short game regression. But like we mentioned earlier, you can't just be playing all the chalk. You've got to find a way to take some of those mid to early guys that have the softer greens and that are going to give you that lower ownership as well. So that's where I use this to my advantage. Around the greens, the same thing. These guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes, if I can find a stat profile like Aldrich Potgieter here, where he gained ball striking but lost with the short game, and he's already on that fringe of that top 20, then maybe he's somebody that I consider as one of those placement point guys towards the top end of the board. So I'm always using these to my advantage. You saw that with the player pool tags with my Patreon player pool, but I also have course history. So I try and find guys that are good at Colonial Country Club. If I can find a low-owned player for Sunday that's good around here, maybe I add them to a few lineups. High upside players, so those are guys that make a lot of birdies or are skilled par 5 scorers. Those are the, by the way, birdie production is directly tied to DraftKings scoring, so that is always something that I'm looking for on a slate. And then the last one, which we can take a look at the entire event stuff to try and find these plays, are the placement point players that I'm incorporating. And as I was saying, the full event stuff is a little bit better for this. So to kind of go through these and point out a few guys that I think make sense for it. Like a Novak is gaining 6 strokes ball striking, and he's a little bit further down the board. Number 1 ball striker in the field is Scotty Scheffler. So like, I don't think that he's a terrible guy to use as a conviction play towards the top. Emiliano Grillo, he's also won here before. Like his stats over the 3 days look very favorable. Potgieter, Castillo also gaining over 6 strokes in that category. If you're going to use chalky guys towards the top here, my preference, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly how you approach your portfolio in this kind of slate, is that the ball strikers are the most reliable players. So if I'm going to be forced to take guys towards the top, especially if they're going to be the same, if not lower ownership compared to some of the other guys around them, then that's going to be what I choose to do. So I'll see if there's any player pool deep dives that we still haven't done in the live chat. If not, we're going to go through some strategy stuff on DraftKings. Where we leave off. Thoughts on Gim as a dart throw? I think a dart throw would be a good way to put it with Gim. And he obviously had a very down round 3. You take a look at it, he lost in all 4 stat categories, but he's the or he could. I mean, rounds 1 and 2 were great for Gim. He was one of the best ball strikers we had in the entire field. Round 2, he gained over 5.5 strokes ball striking. Round number 1, he gained 2.5 strokes with the ball striking categories. Yeah, this is a decent bounce back spot because remember, it's only 18 holes. Golf's a wild sport. Sometimes you wake up one day and you just don't have your best stuff. That's golfers, that's life, that's everyone out there, right? Has woken up and maybe just hasn't had the best day before. Yeah, give him a break, right? He could definitely go out there, have a bounce back, and just remind yourself sometimes that golf is a crazy sport. So if it's only 18 holes where it went sideways, then for sure they could turn it around. He said Fleetwood take just continues to spin his wheels. Oh boy, Fleetwood in contention or on the edge of contention is a Fleetwood that I'm normally fading. I've got to say, I've got a lot of main slate exposure, so it is a little bit of a self-hedge, but my take is that Fleetwood on Sundays is normally something I don't touch with a 10-foot pole, but I will go to the shots gained metrics because this is a database show, and I try and keep my opinions out of it as much as humanly possible. He lost strokes on approach today, which wasn't that great, and he wasn't hitting all that many fairways. So round 3 was definitely the fall off, but rounds 1 and 2, just like a Doug Gim. Short game was there round 1. Round 2, it was all the ball striking. Today, it all fell apart. Maybe tomorrow's the day it all comes together, at least kind of based on the trend with the first 3 days. That's kind of what you'd expect to happen round 4, following that kind of a pattern, but yeah, I don't know. Fleetwood on Sundays, man, he's got like some type of incurable disease. He's allergic to success. It's probably the best way to put it. The pot getter. What an epic nickname. Who has the lowest odds to win, but they're in contention? So who has a good chance to win, I guess? That's in contention. Once again, not really sure what you mean there. You're going to have to rephrase that, my man. Why is BTN not showing the round 3 scores? You have to go back to round 3, Brian, to get the round 3 scores. So that's how you do that. It's already set up for round 4 now. So that's why it says through nothing, right? And then the even par score there. And he said, do you think Ricky makes a big run at the championship given his course experience? I hope he does. So somebody asked before my thought on Ricky Fowler, and I said cautiously optimistic. Shots gained profile is about as average as it gets this week. He's kind of been short game dependent, which is a bit of a red flag. But the ball striking, as you'd imagine for a guy in the top 10, is rock solid. He's gaining about 2 strokes in both of those categories. Cautiously optimistic, man. I hope he pulls it off, but his track record lately has not been very good on Sunday. So let's go through the contests that are available on DraftKings, give you guys an idea of the best contests to attack. Frankly, it's the exact same as the last 2 days. The contests are maybe a little bigger for tomorrow. So the big long drive, $100 single entry, is a little bit larger than what you had for round 3, but I don't really like the payout structure here. It is a 6 to first place, which a lot of times it's closer to like 15% or 12.5% to first place, which it's not the end of the world, but it is a sub-ideal payout structure, at least based on what we're used to. This one is the big drive the green, so the $5 150 max, and unfortunately is also a 5th to first place. So the GPPs are a little bit larger, but DraftKings, for whatever reason, isn't structuring the payouts on these in a very favorable fashion. They're all very top-heavy. They all seem like they're just trying to get a lot of casuals to go out there and want to play. And what is this? This is for the week after, this drive the green that they're posting. Yeah, it's a little bit of a tease, I guess, already having those out here. But or did that lock already? I have no idea what they're doing here on DraftKings. But these contests, just like the last few days, if you want to be sustainable about it, best place to play would be in some of those single entries. The $100 long drive might not be the best contest, but some of these smaller ones are always a decent option. And let me just click this so I can get to the right thing. Let's get these Memorial contests the heck out of here. No one wants to see Memorial when the tournament hasn't even ended yet. We got the dog leg here. So this is the $33 single entry. It's a little bit over 10% to first, but a much flatter payout structure than a lot of those other GPPs that you'll see. Let me see if I can find the $12 Albatross, and that's what we got right here. It's a smaller GPP, so you're not going to get $10,000 for winning, right? No crap with a $12 single entry. But because the payout structure is so much flatter in these kind of single entries, when you don't finish in first and you still crack the top 5, top 10, it's going to actually matter in these sort of contests. So the vast majority of you watching this should be playing in those kind of contests. A lot of you might take $50, maybe take 10 lineups in the big $5 GPP that drive the green that we were mentioning, because you want to win this $10,000. And this is why they have these payout structures out there, because so many casuals see that $10,000 to first place and go, oh, I'm going to win this against 12,000 other people. I hate to be the guy to tell you, but you're probably not going to win against 12,000 other people, especially if you're only putting in 10 entries against people like myself that have 150. And in most cases, for the pros, know a lot more about what they're doing than a lot of the people just watching these videos. So don't go up against pros, sharks like myself, that have 10 to 15 times more lineups than you. I mean, that's just asking to get kicked in the nuts. Before you even start building lineups, you're going to be at such a massive disadvantage to some of those other players. And that's why the single entries are great, because even if I enter those single entries, and I will tomorrow, I enter those all the time, like the $12 and the $33. And I'm somebody that's a higher stakes player than most of you guys watching this. Why? Because they're the best contests that are available. And the best contests that are available don't even matter. It doesn't even matter the payouts or the kind of buy-in that you're getting to on them. I want as much exposure as I can possibly get to the best contest available. Now, I have a lot more exposure on top of that. I'll add 50 max exposure. For example, like this contest, I'll probably have at least 50 entries out there in this, if not the full 150. I've got to say the payout structure is probably the one thing that might keep me off of doing a full 150, but at least 50 lineups in this sort of contest. If you're watching this though, and you only have that $50 bankroll, which by the way is totally fine. Like that's probably most of you guys out there. You're not entering hundreds of dollars on every single slate. A lot of you probably are too, and that's fine, right? You can scale it up, of course. But if you've got that $50, don't put the 10 lineups in here. Don't be a fish that's just paying the rake to a lot of the other sharks. Just divvy it up over some other single entries, whether it's that $33, that $12 that we went through, or even one of the $5, the multitude of $5 single entries that they'll post for any given round. Those are much better, and you can find multiples of them. They'll post 4 or 5 $5 single entries at times for some of these showdown slates. Enter 4 or 5 of those rather than those same 4 to 5 $5 lineups into that large field GPP. So, I mean, we've had this talk a million times, so I guess I shouldn't harp on it too much, but the contest selection really matters. almost just as much as your strategy in building lineups. And now for Sunday, just because it's a little bit different, let's build a lineup here together as well to give you guys an idea. And if you haven't watched a Sunday preview here on this channel quite yet, I like to start with my placement points up top. So I like to right out the bat, get my placement points, the top 5, top 10s out of the way so I can differentiate myself after the fact. So I'm going to throw in a Scotty here, and we're going to talk about why in a second. But the $14,000 price tag is actually, I think, a positive when it comes to tomorrow's slate. So let's throw in a Scotty Scheffler. Let's use Kurt Kitayama at $7,400. Let's take a Castillo. Where's Castillo at there? At $7,000 himself. And that's 3 guys starting in the top 20. So I think especially like large field GPPs, you might want to cut it off starting with 3 guys towards the top because you've got 40% owned Scotty. You've got 10 to 15% owned Kitayama, 10 to 15% owned Ricky Castillo as well. We really only have 3 spots in this lineup remaining where we can get different to the rest of the field. So let's start that. And the reason why I like Scotty Scheffler and that price tag is it forces us down towards the bottom. And as long as we're not taking a Matty Schmid, some of these other guys that are real chalky at the bottom end of the 7K range, we're going to have plenty of opportunities to get that differentiation. So for example, like a Max Grazierman, he's not somebody that's really going to get you placement points at T43, but he is a high upside golfer that makes a lot of birdies and he can get hot with the putter. So for example, I'm using him as a high upside player in my lineups for that exact reason. Let's find another lower owned pivot. And the other part to it too is that because he's T43, no one's really going to use him. Let's throw in a Taylor Moore at +4, the ultimate, or he could after he played absolute dog shit golf today. He's $7,200 though. No one's going to play him. And just like a Max Grazierman, he's a streaky putter that makes a lot of birdies when he's playing his best golf. So, these early guys like a Grazierman or more, they are going to have more pristine greens to putt on, also softer conditions to attack some of those pins. And then as long as your last man in here isn't an overly chalky player, and just looking at the guys available at $6,500, $6,600, there's not really anyone there that even is chalky enough to really be a concern to round off this sort of lineup. That's why you want to cap it off at maybe 3 chalky players towards the top so that you can use these last 2 to 3 players to get that differentiation. Now, if you were in a single entry, let's say like one of those like $12 or $33 single entries where you're not entering against 12,000 people, rather like 200 to 500 entries that you're playing against, maybe you can afford to take a little bit more chalk, but I wouldn't take like 4 mega chalky guys, like these top 3 that we already had in there, and then maybe using Schmid as your 7K player. Like you can afford taking a Grillo. He was still going to be pretty chalky at that number. Maybe even like a Glover, I would say, at like -6. Maybe you could get away with that in a single entry, but don't push it too far, right? Like don't go over the line when it goes to that chalk. Even in single entries, even in those smaller field GPPs, you need leverage so that you can move up those leaderboards. Cash is a different story. If you only have to beat half the field in like a double up, that sort of contest, then take a little bit more chalk. 4, even 5 guys towards the top is okay in those sort of builds. But the larger the contest that you're entering, so those big GPPs, the $525, of course, the biggest contest that you have out there, the bigger the contest, the more different that you need to be. So those would be some of the general guidelines that you use for your round 4 exposure. If you don't use a Scotty Scheffler, it does force you to be a little bit more balanced, which it is kind of nice to force down the salary. But if you choose to be a little bit more balanced, I will show you guys what that looks like a bit. Let's throw in a Jordan Spieth with his course history. May or may not be in my player pool. You guys can probably tell he is. You guys know I absolutely love the guy. Let's throw in a Bhatia at $9,000. Bhatia is going to be one of those placement point guys that we're mixing in. And you can see, even with 2 stud players in this lineup, we're still at $7,800. And I guess the thing that makes this slate a little bit different than some of the like rounds 2 and 3 showdowns that we went through is that this 8K range on average had much higher ownership in rounds 2 and 3 showdown. But because the placement points are such a big factor, if you avoid like a McIntyre or a Novak in this range, you can find leverage plays like a Keith Mitchell who are going to be like 5 to 6% owned tomorrow. So just because you go with this more balanced lineup doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to run into more chalk, but it does mean that you can run into more chalk. So for example, let's say that you used Bhatia, let's throw in a McIntyre there, and let's assume that your first man in was maybe a Fleetwood instead that's a little bit further towards the top. The balanced lineup it's a little bit easier to be too chalky towards the top end of the board because now we still have $7,300 remaining for our last 3 spots and already those 3 pieces of chalk in there with that kind of average salary remaining. If you throw in a Schmid, you throw in like a Grillo as a 4th man in there, that's just like the other lineup when you started to get a little bit too chalky when you add in that 4th piece of chalk. You still have to be cognizant about that aspect. And I'd say even more so when you have this balanced build because there is a lot of chalk in the 8K range. It's not just a McIntyre, but a Hisatune, a Colley, a Glover, all going to get ownership. A Novak, a Spawn at -6 and -7 are also going to be in that 15 to 20% ownership range. And especially if you avoid like a Fleetwood here. I mean, like you could use Spawn, Novak, like you could start with a core 4 of this and still have 75.5 remaining for your last 2 spots. You could probably make this kind of 4 work in a few lineups, but you're probably going to have to leave salary on the table. And your last 2 players here are going to have to be royally underowned to get any sort of leverage to the field. So that's kind of why I think spending the salary on Scotty might be worth it, even at $14,000, because it gets you off of that kind of lineup construction. And if you're building with optimizers, it does make your life a little bit easier when it comes to getting that leverage, especially if guys like Matthias Schmid are a fade for you in your exposure for tomorrow. And if you guys probably couldn't have guessed at this point, I am not playing Matthias Schmid in my round 4 showdown lineups because just because you're starting towards the top end of the board, just to get back to what we were mentioning before, does not mean you're going to finish in that top 5. You shoot +2, even starting at that -13. Maybe you grab like 4th or 5th in terms of your placement, but a +2 and then the 5th place placement points aren't going to be enough to make the optimal lineup. So don't be afraid to fade that chalk, just like we were going through before with those top 10 highest owned players. Outside of that, make sure you join the SHIPIT Nation channel for all of their projections, the stone for round number 4. My Patreon page, as we were showing you guys before, is where you can find all of my projections and exposure for tomorrow. And those are already posted over there. So if you guys are curious about exactly who I'm playing, you guys can find those on my Patreon page. But on the stone, I know we haven't even mentioned that. They haven't quite finished the stone for round 4 yet, but they're going to have round 4 historical on there, which I know round 2 and 3 historical isn't really something that I personally use all that much. I've mentioned that on this live stream a few times. Round 4 historical, though, is a little bit different. When round 4 historical brings into play contention, it brings into nerves. It's the day where you earn your paycheck, and there's always going to be a little bit more pressure when that's the case. Round 4 historical is, in my opinion, one of the best things that you can look at. So I know we mentioned 4 or 5 things that I was looking for in players for this slate specifically. I don't quite only look at the round 4 stuff as like one of my player pool tags, but it's damn near close to being added to it at some point. So make sure to check that out. The stone is the absolute nuts. And let's take down some contests for round number 4. I'm going to see some of your avatars, some of your logos towards the top. Let's take something down for the big guy. Still thinking of my guy, James, obviously on everyone's hearts at this point. And what better way to remember him than to try and take something down here on this lovely Sunday. So let's see if there's any last-second questions to go through. CBES 1 through 10. Ooh. Let's look at the shots gained because, my instant reaction's a 5 out of 10 because I don't really have a hot take on him, but let's defer to the round 3 stats. Rounds 1 and 2, he set up beautifully. I mean, ball striking, gaining in round 1, but losing with the putter. Round 2, same thing. He gained with the approach play, but lost a stroke putting. Today, it was not the opposite. He still did gain with the ball striking stats, but he flipped the putter around. So he's a 7 out of 10, man. I mean, the ball striking's been there all 3 rounds. I love that for CBES. And, I don't think it's a massive red flag that he gained 1 stroke putting. If this was 3 strokes putting, I'd say, oh, he had his spike putting around. Probably not going to happen 2 days in a row. Gaining 1 stroke putting is just like a decent day, right? It's not like he's due to come crumbling back down to earth after gaining 1 stroke. Yeah, 7 out of 10. I like it. Your last spot in is Spawn or McIntyre. Which one would I pick? So I'll give you the pros and cons of both because I don't necessarily want to build your lineups for you. I have no incentive to do so. But if I'm going to go through the 2, Spawn, maybe a little bit lower owned than McIntyre just because McIntyre had that nuclear round. And if I was comparing the shots gained metrics between the 2, Spawn would be slightly more favorable just because he wasn't as short game dependent today. He gained strokes on approach, which is always nice to see. McIntyre did go lower. That's also why I think he's going to be slightly higher owned, but he gained like 3 strokes putting. So the pros and cons would be Spawn would be a little sneakier and he still hit the ball well. It would be the argument for that. The argument for McIntyre, though, would be that he's playing better golf. So I would balance those. If you need the lower owned one, maybe you go to JJ Spawn. If you don't care about the ownership, then Robert McIntyre would be live. What's going on, Joseph? better to have you late than never. We're going to be doing the prop live stream here soon, which, by the way, guys, prop live stream will be at 9 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel for all the underdog and price fix stuff for round number 4. You guys can catch that on the LukeDFS YouTube. On Twitter X, I'll be putting out a link for that as well. So if you already follow me over there, you'll be able to find the content that ways. But that's not only for the props and underdog prize picks, but we're also going to do matchups and 3-balls on sites like DraftKings and FanDuel. So if you guys don't just play the fantasy side, you're also doing some of that stuff, make sure to stop on by a little bit later. And my guy Joseph is always a regular there, so I know he'll be there later. He said nothing at -1 can make enough for a winning lineup. Bro, your text to speech is horrible, man. You're gonna have to start typing it yourself. I know what you're saying here, though. You're saying at -1, can they still make the winning lineup? Absolutely. If a guy was +20 at this point, they can still make the winning lineup, because you don't have to start with placement points to make the optimal. Like, if you're only using guys in your lineups that you think can finish top 5, then you're not playing Sunday Showdown the right way, because you're going to need 2, maybe 3 guys towards the top that get that done. The other 3 to 4 guys in your lineup can be anywhere. I mean, they could be the first group off for all we know, starting at like 3-4 over par. That's why guys like Taylor Moore are alive. That's why there's guys like Ryan Gerard, for example. I'm not saying that like they're the best plays for tomorrow. They're not. They don't have the best form, but they could get there if they shoot -3, -4. That's really all it takes. So yeah, let's work on the text to speech though, man. It's kind of brutal, I've got to say. He said 3 balls. Used to know a kid in high school that was known for that. No comment, man. That's a funny comment if I've seen one. But best of luck, guys, with everything that you're doing on Sunday. Join SHIPIT Nation if you guys haven't already for all of their projections. Also join my Patreon page for all of that. But I'll see you guys next week.